Welcome to How to Garden. Give this a couple of minutes, let a few people come in here. Got a few people coming in. Welcome to How to Garden. Tonight's subject is soil building. It's the foundation of all gardening. I'll start with identifying your soil. First thing you really need to do is identify what your soil type is. Is it sand soil, clay, or silt? That'll be your base. There's a very, very easy way to test this. It's called the jar method. Simply put a small shovelful of your soil into the jar. Add water and shake it and let it settle. You'll be able to tell what your sand layer is, what your clay level is, what your silt layer is, and all the organics will float up to the top. The next thing you need to do is determine your pH. There's several ways to go about doing this. One of the oldest tricks is to, at that point, separate your water that was in your jar and add baking soda to one sample and see if it reacts, or vinegar to the other and see if that reacts. Nowadays, there are things that are significantly more accurate than that. You can buy litmus paper, sold at most garden stores. And all you do is dip it into that water and it'll tell you what your pH is. There's also newer electronics where you can just stick it in your soil and it will tell you what your pH is. Things you'll need to determine are your drainage, your water retention, how much humus you have in your soil, your pH, and you need to do an NPK test. See what your nitrogen, potassium, your NPK. Brain fart. Yeah. Once you've determined what your soil base is, you can go ahead and determine what you need to add. You need to add things like sand for drainage. It tends to be very common in clay soils where you need to add sand and humus. I have sand soil, I need to add humus and clay. So, your basics into your soil building, things that you need to cover. Old-fashioned compost should be added. You can do this in several ways, whether it's in a bin, direct composting, chop and drop. Different things that you can add to the soil over time would be coffee and tea for the nitrogen. Fish, if you happen to be a fisherman, bury your parts in your soil so that it can decompose in there. You don't really want to add fish to your compost. It smells really bad, but burying your leftover fish parts in your soil helps a great deal. If you live near the ocean, seaweed. Good old-fashioned kitchen scraps. Banana peels, eggshells. It's also vermicompost. there are manures. There's a variety of different manures that are easily accessible. Horse manure, cow manure, chicken manure. Manures from pets such as guinea pigs or rabbits, chickens. There are some dangers that need to be covered with the manures. One, certain manures can be too hot, so you need to compost them down 6 months, or at least until they rise up to 170 degrees and then cool back down. You also need to test it to make sure that there's not a broadleaf herbicide that has contaminated it. It's become quite prevalent in horse manure and cow manure, and it's actually made it into the systems where if you go buy black cow or compost commercially, it could be an issue, and you need to test those products now. You test those products by starting some beans in a bag with a paper towel. Once they start to sprout, put them in the bag of compost or manure, and if they come out all funky and kind of twisted, you don't want to use it, get rid of it. If they grow fine, you're good to go. Green manures tends to be a safer option to go since there's been contamination in our manure supplies here in the United States. Good green manures are Mexican sunflower, alfalfa, clover, bean greens, comfrey, pigeon pea, and clumping grass. You should also learn to identify different types of plants so that you make sure you don't get cross-contaminations by certain plants that can be hazardous, such as black walnut. If you add black walnut, you might have an issue. Black walnut will kill your garden in no time at all. Different techniques that are really, really helpful for building your soil are techniques like chop and drop. Chop and drop is a form of composting in place. You literally chop and drop. You've got a plant, it needs to be trimmed, you go ahead and trim it. You can either drop it right at the base of that tree and feed it back to that tree or whatever other plant it happens to be, or you can move it to somewhere else in your garden and drop it there. For instance, I will take Mexican sunflower, cut it up, bring it over and put it at the base of my trees. Mexican sunflower has roughly the same amount of nitrogen as a chicken manure, so it's a great green manure. Other things that you might want to consider is your mulching. It has other benefits other than just being pretty. By adding mulch, you keep moisture in, and you're able to continuously add biomatter straight into your soil. Different types of mulch doesn't necessarily mean bags of red mulch you can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. I get entire truckloads of chipped tree mulch from my local power company. They'll drop it off right at your house for free. Contact your local power company and ask whether or not they have a company keeping the power lines clear. Once you know what company it is, you can contact the company if you can't do it directly through the power company, or you learn to look out for those trucks. For instance, I've learned to look out for those trucks in my local area, and when I see those guys, I go over, I'll give them a couple drinks, maybe I'll give them $10 or $20, and they come drop the load off at my house. And we're talking massive amounts of free mulch. It's basically trees that have been completely shredded. You got leaves, you got sticks, you got bark, you got heartwood. It's all there. I pile it on thick. As it decomposes in place, I'm building humus. Areas within my yard that was pure sand that you could grow literally nothing in now has 2 or 3 inches of humus, and I can plant most plants in them and they survive very well. Yard waste is a great resource. Don't use a lot of chemicals, or your neighbors don't use a lot of chemicals or any chemicals at all. You can collect their grass cuttings. For instance, one of my neighbors down the road, he gathers up all his yard clippings because he uses a bag while he's mowing, and he piles it out in front of his house. I swing by with a wheelbarrow a couple times a year, grab it up, and add it to my garden. Fall leaves. Fall leaves are absolutely wonderful for mulching with. Because it really helps so much with the weeds, but the soil building is vastly superior to most things I've tried. People conveniently bag it up and set it right out to the road. You know somebody's going to be throwing them out, or you see somebody throwing out bagged leaves, pick them up, bring them home, use them as you need. Different leaves have different qualities. I myself like oak leaves around my citrus trees. There's a fungus that comes with the oak that the citrus seems to really like. Pine straw. People just bag it up and give it away. They put it out to the road. Sometimes I find posts online every once in a while where somebody has a bunch of pine straw in their yard and they don't want to rake it up. So if they'll post it online, you can swing by, rake it up, put it in bags, take it home. Pine straw is great for suppressing the weeds. It does break down and create a nice humus. There are different types of mulches that you can get out of the agricultural industry. Straw. Don't recommend it right now because of the broadleaf contamination. Same with hay. They work great to suppress the weeds. They build wonderful soil. But right now, I don't recommend using them because there's a good chance of you getting a soil contamination. Soil contamination is a broadleaf chemical that has just been outlawed in the United States, which is very good news. However, it's probably going to take a significant amount of time before it's no longer circulating through our systems. If you do get contaminated, you're looking at 5 years of that area where you're not really going to be able to grow any vegetables, possibly trees. You will be able to grow things like corn, wheat, barley. Basically, it kills everything that is a dicot. Monocots such as corn, bananas, grasses, wheat, you can grow those, no problem. So if you do get contaminated, grow corn in that spot. Don't compost down the corn stalks. It's still safe to eat the corn, but it's going to be sucking up that broadleaf contamination, and you can just take the corn stalks and go ahead and get them out of your garden. If you leave them, you'll continue contamination, and it'll help pull some of it out. This problem has also been discovered to be in sugarcane now. Unfortunately, sugarcane is a very good soil additive here in Florida, where you can go buy the sugarcane mills in South Florida, and they'll load your truck up for free with spent sugarcane. You can take it home and use it as a fine mulch. It's wonderful. Unfortunately, it's now contaminated. When you're building your soil mass and getting a nice humus going, it takes a bit of time. You're looking at 3 to 5 years in some areas. The further north you go, the longer it takes. The further south you go with heavier rains, the quicker it breaks down, but the quicker it gets washed away. So there are ways that you can help determine exactly how long it's going to stay. For instance, I'm in Florida and I have Florida sand soil. If I add clay to my soil, clay will slow down the compost and kind of encapsulate it and hold it in my soil longer. An easy way for a normal gardener to do that is unscented cat litter. You buy it just about everywhere by the bag. It's granulated. You just start tossing it in on top of your mulch, and you'll start to build up more humus that way because it now has clay involved. Biomasses, it really doesn't matter what you dump on it as long as it's not contaminated or a plant that might have chemicals of its own, such as black walnut, that will kill things. Hay and straw bales has been a very good resource for a long time before the contamination. If you're somebody who likes to use hay and straw bales, I recommend right now that you switch over to peanut straw. Peanut straw doesn't have the contamination. If they treat the area with a broadleaf herbicide, then the peanuts won't grow. The straw also has the benefit of building your nitrogen. Wheat straw, very prevalent in the Midwest. Don't use it right now. If you're anywhere in the southern United States, far enough south, Central America, South America, anywhere subtropic or tropic, probably have palm trees nearby. Palm trees are easily gather the palm fronds and shred them, and you can use that biomass. It has an extra benefit of being a phosphates collector. So you'll be actually feeding it your plants phosphates. If you don't live in areas where you can actually acquire that, you can use cocoa coir. Cocoa coir is a commercially available product that's already been shredded and compressed into small blocks. Your average small block, if properly fluffed and water is added, will equal an entire wheelbarrow of cocoa coir that you can add to your soil. And because it's from a palm, it also comes with the phosphorus. Purchase mulch. There are some things you do and don't want to do if you're purchasing your mulch. Pine nuggets is a very good mulch to use, but the red dyed mulch that is very popular is not. Reason being is the dyes that are used in that tend to contaminate your soil. You've got cypress mulch. Cypress mulch has its benefits and a few negatives. One of the big benefits of a good cypress mulch is it tends to stick around for a long period of time. Therefore, you're mulching less. Some people want that. I don't want that. I want to mulch more so that it builds my soil. Also, the cypress mulch has been a bit of an issue here in Florida because they were cutting down all the cypress trees, and now the Florida cypress trees are endangered, and it's no longer legal to cut down a cypress tree. You literally have to get a permit and have somebody come out and determine whether or not you really need to cut down that cypress tree. If you get caught cutting down a cypress tree in Florida, the fines can be quite heavy. When determining what type of additions you need to add to your soil when you're doing your soil building, and you've already gone through the steps of determining what type of soil it is and what your available resources are for biomass to add, there are other additives that you need to consider. Biochar is very, very good additive. It holds water. Basically, charcoal holds 10 times its own weight in water, and it holds onto it for a long period of time. Kind of gives a nice place for all the bacteria and the fungus to hide out during very, very harsh times, and it gives something for your plants to actually attach to and be able to access the water by trading with the fungus that is inside of it. Additions that you should consider are eggshells, compost, biomatter or biomass, clay in some areas, sand in others, garden lime if you don't have access to a large amount of eggshells or you just don't want to deal with the eggshells, garden sulfur if you need to lower your pH, which garden lime raises your pH. Other things you're going to want to consider is what you intend on growing in that area. That comes down to providing the needs for the individual plants. You can heat all the compost in the world, throw every additive that you've ever considered into it, and then go plant the wrong plant in it. Some plants like your sand, some like clay, some like that humus. So you need to determine what soil and how much to build in a particular area. For instance, I'm not doing a whole lot of soil building around my citrus because my citrus really likes sand. Around other things like my apple trees or my pear trees, I'm building a lot of soil. They require a lot of good soil. They also like more clay in their soil than the Florida sand. So I'm also adding kitty litter, not used fresh. I'm adding leftovers from a guinea pig cage. I'm adding about a foot to a foot and a half of tree mulch per year in that area. And then I'm also doing things like growing peas and beans in that area because those are nitrogen fixers. Since I added all the brown matter that is there, I need to add nitrogen. Growing the nitrogen fixers kind of helps take care of that. And I'm also using a chop and drop from a pigeon pea in that area. Time I trim my pigeon peas, I throw it over in that area to add to the nitrogen. The more nitrogen I add to go with the carbon that I add, the quicker it breaks down, creates better humus. When you're doing your soil building, you need to consider how can you do it at a reasonable price. This is a big sticking point for a lot of people. There are a lot of free resources out there that you can find. If you really, really need biomatter and you can't find a way to get truckloads of it like I've been blessed with, if you drive around your neighborhoods, pick up the bags of leaves, look for people throwing out brush piles, look for logs. Something a lot of people drive right on by are logs from somebody cutting down their tree. Load them up, take them home, have a nice little fire in your backyard, make your own biochar, so that into your soil. You want to try to get around 15%, maybe a little more depending on what you're growing, or a little less depending on other things that you're growing, of humus or organic matter into your soil. You don't really want to cross over the 50-50 line. Once you cross over the 50-50 line, things tend to stay too wet, and then you start using things that you normally wouldn't have. I like to have about 15% in my soil, and I've had to really, really keep it on for several years just to get it to where it started to be that way. Right now, most of my areas that I'm growing in has about 5% organic matter, which is a vast improvement. I have a few areas that are closer to 30%. I have one area in particular that when I'm feeling lazy and I don't feel like going out to the compost, I'll just open the door right off the kitchen, and I dump coffee, eggshells, tea bags, kitchen scraps, pretty much anything I want right up at the base of this one night blooming jasmine. The soil there is very, very rich for about 8 inches deep, and it seems to be growing. Once you have a decent amount of humus in your soil, there comes a time where if you're going to want to make sure there's worms. If they don't move in automatically on their own, you should consider whether or not you should go buy some. Most places here in the United States, you can go to a place that sells fishing bait and buy a tub of worms. If you have a decent amount of soil or humus in your soil where they're going to thrive, you really only need to buy one or two of them and introduce them to your landscape, and they will propagate on their own and just basically turn your entire garden, possibly even parts of your lawn, into the most beautiful soil that you could possibly build. I introduced some into my gardens about 3 years ago. I had the unexpected benefit of now the areas where my grass is that I have not added biomatter is now massively improving from the worms passing through it. And at this point, I'd like to say hi to everybody and ask whether or not you have any questions. Hi, Arkansas Woodcutter, how you doing? Food Forest Permaculture, how you doing, Howie? Through the Eyes of Jamie, how you doing? Miss Arlene Verdita, it is nice to see you. Anybody have any questions about soil building? Hello, Miss Arlene, it's good to see you. Raven's doing well. She's sitting over to the side, watching the chat and making sure everybody behaves.
No, I'm not playing video games.
She's also playing a video game. I'm sorry, you just ended your live. It was really good to see you earlier today. Nice to see you going live. Howie, are you still in the room? He's gone? Okay. Arkansas Woodcutter, you've been doing really good in your gardens this year. I've been following quite a few of your videos, and your shed wars are absolutely hilarious. A couple times you've had me rolling, laughing, just actually making my sides hurt. All right, well, I guess this one's going to be a relatively short live. I've done covered the subject pretty well. One of the key things that you're going to want to have to do is just bring in as much biomass as you can. A couple people I happen to know in California during the summer, not only do they have soil that's 120 degrees and as hard as concrete, once they started adding large amounts of biomass, their soil cooled down dramatically, and they started being able to grow food and fruit trees and various other berry bushes, and basically whatever they wanted. But it took about 3 to 5 years for them to build up their soil. Also, another thing I do not recommend while you're building soil beyond the first year is tilling. It's okay to till the first year and get a bunch of things in your soil, but after that, just add your stuff directly on top. The reason I say that is because what tends to happen is year after year, as you re-till the soil trying to add more stuff in it, you actually end up losing more carbon as it evaporates into the air by tilling it. As it's exposed directly to the air after it's already composted down, it literally evaporates into the air. By covering the soil, it builds from the top down, and worms help carry it down. There's also a theory called always keeping the root or a root in the soil. Different types of roots will shoot down further and further, and then when that plant dies, it composts down and it creates channels where the compost at the top carries down water and other nutrients. A good plant to be able to do that is radishes, specifically the Asian varieties. Comfrey is also very good for that and happens to make a really good chop and drop because it's a mineral accumulator. I don't use comfrey in my garden. I have in the past. My mineral accumulators I use are fruit trees and other different types of trees because I've identified which ones are going to accumulate exactly what minerals. Plus, I get lots and lots of free leaves. So I don't really need to grow the comfrey to accumulate everything. People literally just throw it away around me or even deliver it right into my front yard because I know I'm going to compost it. If you happen to live in a rural area, posting a sign at the front of your property asking for people to drop off different things like leaves, straw, hay, manures, pumpkins, or Christmas trees, and that you can compost it. People will literally drop it off in your driveway for you. Sometimes that's a bit inconvenient when you come home from work and there's 20 bags of leaves in your driveway that wasn't there when you left. That happened to me a couple times. There are a lot of different resources, and I've kind of found different ways to use them. Leaves in particular. Gentleman down the road from me used to rake up all the leaves and just dump them at the edge of his property. So I'm doing that once, and I took a couple of my empty trash cans on wheels over to his house and asked him if I could have the leaves. He was kind enough to continue raking them all up and just stick them in my trash cans and then drag them over to my house. That was how I got a couple of my beds at this house started when I didn't have access to biomass other than what I was producing on site. Don't be afraid to ask. If you like to get a lot of coffee grounds, wandering into a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts or any local coffee or tea house and ask them what they do with their coffee grounds. A lot of times they just throw them away. And if you buy a couple cups of coffee from them and say, hey, I can come by on Tuesday around 5 o'clock. Do you think you'd be able to save the coffee grounds for me? A lot of times they'll say yes. And you just come in, you buy yourself a cup of coffee while you're there. You pick up 4, 5, 6 bags of coffee grounds, load them up into your truck, go on home, you add your composter directly to your soil. Now there is a A little bit of a problem with caffeine if it hasn't fully composted down. So adding it directly to a vegetable bed can directly affect how well various things like squash or corn will grow. If you let it compost down for 6 months to a year, that problem tends to go away. However, if you happen to be growing things like coffee or tea, adding coffee or tea directly to the soil in that area and letting it directly compost does not affect those plants at all. Also, dumping it at the base of banana trees does a phenomenal job. Bananas love coffee. Other free resources I found over the last few years, Lowe's. Most Lowe's, if you go into the gardening section, will have an area off to the side where they take their dead plants or dying plants, and they'll have a bin just completely full of pots with soil, sometimes without, but usually with soil. And if you ask, they have a program for pots for gardeners. A lot of times, because they come with soil, it's a great bargain. Who doesn't want free pots and free soil? You get a couple of different things there. You get all the free pots. You might be able to grow in the soil right away, or you can add the soil to your different beds or other larger pots. Unfortunately, Home Depot does not have such a program. But I've gotten quite a few pots out of Lowe's. Another free resource you want to look into is Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. There are often people giving away manures, compost, mulch, pots, plants. Love it when people give me free plants. Sometimes you'll meet somebody on there that is selling a bunch of plants. Generally speaking, gardeners like to trade. So if you go over there with 3 or 4 plants, or you go over there and you buy a couple plants and you see what type of plants they have, and you identify what you have that they don't have, then you go back over and see them again, you bring a few plants that they don't have, they'll trade. Then you can start yourself a nice little trading system going. For instance, something that I did not that long ago is a lady that doesn't live very far from me was advertising on Facebook that she was selling a bunch of plants. I went over there. Really wasn't anything that I in particular wanted. There's a couple things that I could find useful, and I got my hands on a couple of mints. While I was there, I was able to see what type of things she had. She was an older Filipino lady. She was growing sweet potatoes, and I knew before too long I'd be wanting some sweet potato slips. I happen to grow a purple yam that is called ube. Very popular in the Philippines from what I understand. So a few weeks went by and I had harvested my yams, and I took a couple nice full-size ubes and quite a few of the bulbils, and I went over to her house and I just gave them to her, and I asked for some sweet potato cuttings instead as a trade. She gave me a whole bunch of sweet potato cuttings. I now have 3 different types of sweet potatoes that I've never grown before. I have a white one, a red one, and a purple one. And then I have the normal on sweet potato that us in North America are used to. This year I have 4 types of sweet potatoes, and I just traded something I already had for those sweet potatoes. I went back a couple weeks later to give her some cuttings from a mulberry tree, because I noticed that she didn't have any mulberry trees, and it is my personal belief everybody should have a mulberry tree. Gave her a couple mulberries, she loaded me up on a bunch of tomatoes. Being able to start connections like that end up working good for both people, and it's a free resource. I know one gentleman that I was saying to him that I was having a hard time getting the very large loads of mulch. seemed like he was getting every load of mulch in the area. I oversaw him. He was easily getting 15 to 20 truckloads of free mulch delivered to his house every week. I just had to know how he was doing that. He said, well, when he sees them in his neighborhood, he chases them down and he gives the driver $20 and says, hey, drop that load off over at my house and I'll give you a case of beer when you're here. Works very well. I have one lady that drops off the free mulch. She has no interest in money or free beer or anything like that. She's a gardener. She's completely addicted to plants. She'll look through my plants and see if I have anything that she wants. So I've traded a couple of plants with this lady for basically what would be about $1,000 worth of mulch if I had it actually brought to the house. Other things you'll want to consider is whether or not you want to go into actually producing things like biochar. Some people don't have the ability like I do to be able to go outside, have a fire, or they don't have a fireplace. Because I can go outside and have a fire, put it out, and produce my own biochar, I pick up people's logs. I also use those logs once they're half rotten down if I didn't burn them to create Google mounds. If you're in a situation where you're unable to be able to do a process like that, there are relatively cheap resources to be able to get it instead of ordering professional biochar. Professional biochar can be very expensive. You can go to any place that sells charcoal for your grill. What you want to purchase isn't a charcoal briquette. You want to purchase a hardwood lump charcoal. In my area, it's called cowboy charcoal. It's a hardwood lump charcoal. Comes in 40-pound bags for $11. You can bring that home. You can break it up, powderize it, and mix it into your soil, or you can bring it home and charge it by adding your NPK to it. Usually I use a manure tea or a compost tea to do so, or you just throw some of it in your compost to help enrich your compost so when you're using it, it automatically comes out charged. And go ahead and use it. If you're doing small scale, like in an apartment or a condo, that's a very cheap resource. A 40-pound bag would go a long way. Other resources you might want to be able to consider is getting things like rice husks or mulching on top of pots. I bring this up because I happen to know somebody that is very, very fond of using the rice husk with his tomato plants. Buys a 50-pound bag and it'll last him all year. Doesn't have to worry about trying to remove it. It's going to go ahead and compost down and add to the soil. I know one lady over in Orlando that is probably the best vegetable gardener I've ever seen in Florida, and growing vegetables is particularly difficult here. Every year, she's got a reasonable amount of money. She's not rich by any means. She can afford to drop $300 or $400 on soil every year. She buys $300 or $400 worth of soil to refill very large pots. At the end of the season, she takes those very large pots and she divvies all the soil up, but she considers it spent soil around her fruit trees and in other vegetable beds. She only grow in the big pots for 1 year, so she's basically reusing it by adding it to raised beds around her fruit trees. She is absolutely gorgeous gardens. Her production of vegetables on the property that she has is up there with about a 5-acre farm here in Florida for what they normally get in vegetables. She's doing it on an urban lot. She doesn't have the ability to bring in the biomass because that particular neighborhood has a homeowners association that will not allow dumping of mulch or things like that in the front, and there's no gate at her house that would allow them to dump it in the backyard where they wouldn't see it. So her solution has basically been to import $300 to $500 worth of soil every year, bagged, where she goes down with a pickup truck that she rents from Home Depot because she doesn't have a truck, and imports all this bagged soil year after year. It is probably the most expensive possible way that you can get and build your soils. It works for her. I couldn't pull that off. I had to go on the cheap. For me, huge loads of mulch delivered to the empty lot next door is actually the best option I've ever had, plus adding the biochar. I had biochar everywhere. And I literally mean everywhere. If something comes in the yard and digs a little hole in the yard, like a raccoon or a possum or some other critter, I'll run over there and stick a piece of charcoal in it and cover it back up. All right, I guess that concludes today. If anybody has any questions, this is your last chance. Any questions, anyone? All right, I guess I'm going to call it then. Everybody have a good night, and thank you very much for coming. Goodbye.